Hi, I'm very pleased today to talk to Jason Ricci and Caitlin Dibble, talking about the brand new album that's just about to come out, 13 Hours. And yeah, very pleased to have you two with me. How are you both?
Doing great, waking up and coming to in New Orleans.
Thanks for having us.
A pleasure, Jason. A pleasure. Um, Obviously, we want to talk about the brand new album. I think it's due out at the end of May. It's
Yes.
a so called 13 Hours. I guess the track that we should maybe start with is the title track, 13 Hours, which actually closes the album and is dedicated to your previous drummer, John Perkins. I think this is the first album you've recorded since we lost John. Was his sort of presence there throughout the whole album? Was that something that you were very aware of?
Yes. I mean, we lost John Perkins while we were off on tour, and he has
Hmm.
always been a big part of holding uh, this band together as a family. Everyone who plays in the Bad Kinds had spent years and years playing with John Perkins.
Yeah.
So he's a huge part of understanding how to be the kind of bandmate that we want to be to each other and the kind of sound we want. So we thought about him a lot as we played and toured over the last few years since we lost
Yeah,
John.
I've been a follower of you guys for a while, and I remember very much the time when John passed, and the impact that had, and the social media posts that you both put up, and yeah, it was a very difficult time, I'm sure.
Well, he really he left a lot of beautiful memories, and really we thought a lot about him as we were on the road, and I think the 13
Mm,
hours track especially ended up infused with a lot of the sound of canned heat from the 60s, because there was this
yeah,
memory of going down those highways with John
yeah,
Perkins either driving or sitting passenger side, with this kind of amazing optimism that he managed to have from someone who had seen stuff from all over the world and played for years and still knew to greet the craziest of stories and the strangest of circumstance with a grin and a helpful hand.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it's a wonderful track, and it's quite a long track, but it needed to be, and it certainly conveys that kind of road trip mentality.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Steve, I just want to say thanks for following us on social media and thanks for reading the posts about John. That means a lot, all the way from over
yeah.
there too, that ingratiates me a lot right now that you said that. I'll just
Oh well,
add that, Kate wrote the song for John
mhm.
and she was listening to a lot of Canned Heat at the time, and all of that kind of stuff. The album with John Lee Hooker they did and stuff, but like the band was definitely fractured when John
Mm,
died, and like I don't think there was a question of whether or not we would keep going. I mean, we have to make money,
yeah,
but
of course.
the question of would it ever feel good again was definitely there, and, when we were recording, we recorded this at Dockside. So for the viewers that don't know, that's this studio way out in the middle of the swamps up in
Right.
Maurice, Louisiana, and the bands sleep out there. So I walked into the barn where the studio is and early in the morning, and the band was already there in a big circle, discussing the number. And I remember, I'm trying not to get emotional. I remember that being the first time that there was some kind of healing from that fracture, at least
Mm,
from you just watching the guys and everybody together, because in the past with records, for the most part, there's exceptions on certain numbers, but for the most part, either I or Caitlin would write the music and we'd come up with the bass line, the guitar parts, and then we'd
yeah,
bring it to the band. But on this
yeah.
record, almost every single song was written with the band. And,
Wow.
with Brent Johnson especially,
Yeah, yeah,
coming over to the house multiple times and seeing everybody together, kind of mapping out what the emotional content of the thing was gonna be, and then the fact that the song is so long and stuff, that one of the great things that's happened about recording this album is, and I think not just for us, but for a lot of musicians, is the fact that, it's really hard to make any kind of money at all right now because of
Yeah.
Spotify and streaming services, and we hear people complaining about that all the time, and it's understandable, it's true, it's changed the way.
Mm.
I mean, we've become basically traveling T-shirt salesmen, you know what I mean? That's what we are right now, But the subconscious psychological effect that has on making a record is positive, because you're not trying to write a hit. You're not trying to write anything that's going to sell. You've stopped really caring about the radio. They can stream it 10 million times and you're not going to make $50. You know what I mean? It's just like, so the good thing is that we're really making music for the sake of making music. And that is definitely super important when you start including people that we love, like John Perkins.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's
I
definitely
guess,
turned.
yeah. I guess that brings us full circle. What Jason has just said to the opening track, "Sick of this shit," because that kind of covers a lot of that area.
Yeah. Yeah, we're sick of this shit over here.
Yeah.
All of the shit, the political shit is out of control right now. The majority of us are miserable with the leadership in this country right now. There was a time when it was necessary to preserve our peace and kind of try to reconcile and separate our differences and be amicable, but that time is over now. It's been
Mhm.
over for a little while. I'm kind of late to the party, but we're tired of it, and the song's about more than that. It's not just political. It's not just about the music industry. It's about, the constant battle of trying to keep your attitude good for your friends, for your family, for your people, but at the same time, like, acknowledging that things are
Yeah.
hard right now. They're harder than they've been in a while, Yeah.
Well,
Especially in
Yeah.
this country. Yeah. Yeah.
it seems to actually surprisingly bring people together too during the live shows and whatnot. I think people realize I actually am sick of this shit.
Yeah. I think so too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's always the great thing with music, isn't it? That it brings like-minded people together, which I think is so important, especially
Sometimes
when things
makes
aren't
you,
so good.
yeah, and makes you realize that maybe you are more of a like-minded person with somebody next to
Yeah.
you than you previously thought, which is a
Mm.
nice thing.
Or
Yeah.
or or you can identify the ones that are not.
Yes. Yeah, that's true too. That's true too, isn't it? I mean, the whole album really, I get a sense that the the underlying current, if you like, through the album is one of kind of like, well, we're pretty pissed off with things generally, but we're not going to let it beat us, which is a real kind of a bluesy thing anyway, I think.
Thanks, man. That'd be great if that's what people got out of it. I'd be really happy with that.
And I also like this album seems to be a direct kind of stepping stone, if you like. Um, is it Approved by Snakes? I think was the title of the album. Was
That
that
was the
a couple
one
of
that
albums
was
ago?
yeah, that was a few albums ago. Yeah. Yeah. I
But
like
it
that.
feels like that's got that because I think on both albums there's a kind of a lot of references to New Orleans, but not the sort of touristy New Orleans, maybe the underbelly of New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, Kate, the reason I wanted her here is, I mean, like that, like on the song "Long Twisted Night," that's,
Yeah,
so on "Approved by Snakes," you got the perspective of me as a drug addict, and my experience. But on 13 hour, I mean, on "Long Twisted Night," you got the perspective of the person at home dealing with that and
yeah.
dealing with what it's like here for that. So that's really observative. I'm flattered that you referenced Approved by Snakes. That album's like one of our rawest.
Mm.
It's hard for me to listen to. It's challenging to the listener. Probably my least popular record. you know,
Oh, really?
definitely I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that went into that, the label itself, but other things. But I think the music is challenging, and it's not the kind of thing you want to put on all the time. It's dirty. It's a
Yeah.
dirty album.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in my book, that's a good thing.
Oh.
Yeah. I like that. I thought another track that I was really impressed with was I was at the I'm just looking at my notes and I'm trying to remember everything. Yeah, River Invitation. I thought that was a very cleverly written and kind of emotional song.
Well, that was one of the covers that we did for this album, and we got to bring in some horn players that played with Walter Wolfman for, I mean, how many years did Tom Fitzpatrick play with the Roadmasters?
20-something.
Getting to hear that song with this incredible New Orleans horn section was really, really fun and an exciting song to do.
Yeah, it's really good because I think some of the tracks have that kind of almost kind of late night club vibe, kind of really laid back kind of vibe thing going on.
Yeah.
But then, there are other parts that kind of bring it more upbeat.
I mean, we recorded it live in one room. So there's bleed through on every mic, which means that we can't fix any mistakes. So the only overdubs that were done after the track was over. So nothing was fixed on or could be fixed on the record.
No.
So we only had one guitar player on the record, so sometimes he would play rhythm and then would play a lead over it. Or
Right.
Especially if he knew he wanted a couple tries at it. And the same thing happened with the harmonica. A lot of times I was directing the band in there, and
Yeah.
and so I couldn't really take a lead or didn't want to. So there were a few times where the harmonica was overdubbed, but mostly we played the whole thing. When you record that way, there's a lot of sacrifices that have to be made. Like there might be one guy in the band that made a mistake, but the vibe of that particular song is so good that individual now has to live with that mistake, and so do we.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other times you had your best performance, but that performance is going on the cutting room floor because somebody else really screwed up in an irreparable way, right? But for the most part, it wasn't very frustrating. I mean, we could have recorded to tape if we wanted to, analog, because of the way we were recording. We might do that with the next one. I don't know. The technology is so good now that we can make it sound that way really close, without doing it. But Tony Daigle, who really served as the producer, he's going to get production credits on this. He's also mixed and mastered the record. He, works with everybody here. Sonny Landreth, he built Dockside Studios.
Yeah, he's a really talented guy, isn't he?
Yeah, having Tony at the helm was imperative. I think that he is absolutely the sixth member of the band on this record, and we couldn't have done it without him. We had a brand new drummer who's young and green and a great kid and a fast learner and a little sponge with a super attitude, but he needed some direction, and Tony was very firm with him, which is good, and he needed that. There were, for the most part, he knocked it out of the park, but he's from Chicago, so on some of the New Orleans numbers, there was some discrepancies that needed to be handled, and he did that. And Tony came in and made sure that we got it good enough,
Yeah.
And that really showed us, kind of separated the men from the boys, musician-wise, getting to see this young drummer be able to take criticism and use it and improve and not shut down is always a big deal. Everybody, I guess, has that.
And I guess in particular in this instance, because he was on John Perkins' drum stool, basically. So that was like an added pressure, I guess.
Yeah, and the drums were set up right where John set the drums up for Behind the Veil. So that was definitely hard for him and for us too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
must have been difficult.
Yeah, tough position for a kid to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't familiar with him, and I don't know what his background is, but yeah, tough gig.
This is his first real touring band, and this is the first time I've ever taken a young cat under my wing. I've almost
Right.
always hired veterans or people that were older than me. This is the first
Mhm.
time I've grown my own, you know?
Well, it certainly works on the records, and I'm sure it's gonna work live too.
I mean, the biggest decision for that, Steve, was how he was in the van, and
Yeah,
for the 13-hour drives and the 20-hour drives and all of that, and
yeah,
that's where we knew it was gonna work. So if that was gonna work, we could make the music work, because it's much harder to get the guy that's a fit
yeah,
personality, emotionally, spiritually, even physically with moving stuff, having a younger kid in the band. The guys are, I'm getting older, the guys are getting older, back problems and surgeries and,
yeah,
all that shit, and
yeah.
having a young kid to kind of like a little puppy dog to kind of perk
Helps.
us up. It's not a bad thing, Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, this album in particular, and I guess your last few albums, and certainly the album you did with Drew Crown, are very New Orleans feel albums, aren't they? I find that interesting because I know your background is, you've been around, you've done hill country blues in Mississippi, you've done Nashville, you've done Memphis, Texas, I think. But now the music you're doing now is very New Orleans. You aren't bringing too much of previous influences into that. Is that a deliberate thing, or is that just a natural thing? Are you
Yeah.
conscious of that?
That's a great question and very observative on your part, and I appreciate your homework that you've done on this. No, I've never been influenced prior by by a location ever in my life,
Right. No.
and when the reason that I moved back here, because I mean I originally came here to die. I came here to shoot dope and smoke crack until the inevitable overdose. And that didn't happen. While I was here during that time, I fell in love with the way that musicians play here.
Mhm.
And so I moved back with Caitlin after I got out of jail. And the reason that we moved back was to be around the music, around the city. I mean, I've always loved New Orleans artists, always loved Booker, Professor Longhair, Dr. John, Galactic, The Meters, Neville Brothers,
Yeah.
you name it. I've always loved that music, but in terms of being influenced by it, that was not the case. But for me, I came down here. I had an evening and an experience where I was watching Chris Royal, the alto sax player that lives down here, playing an old jazz standard. And I just, Chameleon, not that old, but, it's sort of a cliche kind of number to play out. But the way that it was being played was foreign to me. And the way they were feeling time was like hyper advanced. And I knew that it's not something I could listen to on a record and figure out how to do, that I just had to be around it all the time. It's, in the way that people talk, it's in the way that they act, it's in the way that we go through a red light or don't. And
Mhm. Yeah.
every single thing about the city is in the music and in the people. I love being surrounded by young, talented Black artists constantly that are growing up in the city, growing up in music from the time they're 2, 3 years old. Many cases, there's scholarships to Berkeley or North Texas or Juilliard, and then they're coming back, right? And you got cats like Donald Harrison and Terrence Blanchard and these like leaders of the community. And
Uh-huh.
music in the schools is still fighting to stay alive here. We average 167 live shows a day
Wow.
here in the city, 167 a day, which means on the weekends there's like 2 or 300.
Yeah.
There's Vodakovich, George Porter, all of this incredibly relevant, constantly evolving music that that holds strong reverence for the past, for Louis
Yes.
Armstrong, for the original Funky Meters, for Professor Longhair, but yet is simultaneously constantly evolving, never stopped, constantly being infused with Mardi Gras Indian culture, with funk culture,
Yeah.
with R&B, with hip hop, with blues, any single thing you can imagine. It's just nonstop inspiration. And it's like, it's just impossible for it not to come out in the music. So, I mean, it's a conscious decision to be here, to be around it, but it's unconscious how it slips in because we're not from here. So I'm from Maine, and
Um,
I mean, I only spent 16, 17 years of my life there before I ended up ultimately in the South, Memphis, Nashville, Florida, North Carolina, like you said. But
yeah.
this city is different. It is different than any other place in the world, and we don't need neither Kate or I could care less if the city ever does anything for us. If we ever get booked on Jazz Fest, if we ever get recognized in Offbeat, if the city decides to call us our own, there's plenty of musicians that are born here, that are from here, that need that recognition first. We're just here to be part of it and to receive
Mm.
the constant inspiration that is so abundant that we can't possibly appreciate all of it. There's just no way. It's
Mm.
just that abundant.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
It's a city that really knows how to bring rejuvenation, and
Well,
this
yeah, I mean, you only need to think about Katrina, don't you? And the rejuvenation.
and yeah, the ability that or the understanding that people have here of the importance of neighbors and helping each other out is
Mm.
it's definitely led me to feel more attached to New Orleans as a strange, chaotic community with this unmistakable heartbeat to it. I mean, that's one of the things I loved with Jason's Big Diseasy. That song has such a grit and a strange skipping strut to it
Yeah.
while pulling all of these things that could it could be something that you forget to even notice and now it seems like strange poetry. So I
Do you
can
know
feel
that
the love he has for New Orleans in there.
when I listened to that track, it kind of reminded me in a way of it could have been a Tom Waits track.
Yeah, I get that a lot on a lot of stuff.
But really,
Yeah, I've had that a
I
few
think
times.
lyrically maybe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like I love Tom Waits, and I've been listening to
Mm.
him since I was a little kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
love that whole I'm a big Kerouac and Ginsberg fan, and I had
Yeah.
that that 4 CD collection of beat poetry and stuff, and I devoured that. I devoured Bukowski. So,
Mm.
all of that drug culture, rebellion, counterculture shit, I just ever since I was a kid, I mean, it started with the Dead Kennedys and
Right.
that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, and then just kind of Fugazi and the Pixies, and then just kind of moved
Yeah.
into more, jazz influenced and blues influenced stuff.
Yeah, I find that really interesting because I think that definitely comes across in your lyrics, and I guess in your whole kind of attitude. Uh, there's this kind of very punky new wave element to what you do, and you mix that up with blues. But I think was it your parents that really were blues fans, and so that was part of your growing up.
My mother was.
Your mother,
She
yeah,
yeah, she took me to see Cotton and Musselwhite. I think I was 13. And,
right.
we saw Charlie first. He came to Maine. She took me to see Charlie because I was playing harmonica a little bit. So she took me to
Hmm.
see Charlie, and then she took me to see Cotton after that, and that was heavy duty. Especially that was like late '80s Cotton, so
Hmm.
top of his game vocally, and the horn section wasn't there, but it was still really funky music. really modern at that time, heavy duty bass driven funk, right? Blues.
Yeah.
It was intense. It was intense.
Yeah. So that obviously made a big impression.
Yeah, and Musselwhite had just put out the Ace of Harps album, which was
Yeah.
extremely modern at that time. That was an extremely modern sounding record that had a lot of that same kind of driving modern Coco Taylor rhythm
Yeah.
section, kind of gospel funk influenced bass lines and really high production and stuff. And a lot of that
Mm.
stuff's kind of been forgotten, people have either gone in like a complete, like almost heavy metal or hard rock direction, or they've gone completely back to 1950, Chess
Yeah.
and Sun Studios and stuff. And that whole area between the early 60s and the late 80s with Johnny Guitar Watson and Junior Wells and James Cotton and Musselwhite and that kind of
Mm.
modern blues sound has really been ignored and forgotten,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
in
interesting.
terms of influence on today's
Yeah.
artists.
Yeah.
And that
For
that
sure.
stuff was heavy for me, I loved that music. Albums like High Compression and Mr. Superharp himself, those were really influential records for me. And then when I moved to the South, that was really the way it was down here. Drummers were hitting really, really hard. Bass players were very, very talented. When I lived in Jackson, Mississippi, all of the blues players came out of the church, and they
Yeah.
were all heavy duty. And they weren't, a lot of those guys, we're talking about black musicians, they didn't even know who Little Walter was, you know what I mean? But they were playing, they might have known a tune or two, but they were,
Yeah.
but they were making their own music that was blues to them. David Kimbrough, too, Junior's oldest son, he was
Yeah.
more influenced by Bobby Rush and Prince and Denise LaSalle and that Malaco kind of modern blues, black modern blues, than he was B.B. King or Albert King or
Mm.
T-Bone Walker or anything like that. And of course he was influenced by his father, right? Of course he was.
Good.
But the younger kids, the kids my age or a little bit older, were listening to, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Down home blues
Interesting.
and yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I'm interviewing Charlie next week, so that's quite interesting.
Hey, tell him I said hello. I love that band.
I will. I will. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's really interesting, and especially you mentioned that the hill country thing, because I love that Mississippi hill country stuff. R.L. Burnside, I'm a huge fan of, and obviously Junior Kimbrough, and I know you've worked with Eric Deaton, who's a very talented guy as well, and obviously he's now done some stuff with the Black Keys, but
Yeah, I'm really happy for him. Really happy for him. Nobody deserves it more.
it was almost like that hill country sound was almost Darwinian in a way, that it was there on its own, isolated from everything else.
You got it. Coming from the Northeast in this country, so up there where I grew up in New England, Boston, Maine, New Hampshire, that Rhode Island, the predominant influences were like Ronnie Earl, Sugar Ray Norcia, Roomful of Blues, Duke Robillard. Those were the big acts that were kind of running the scene. But more importantly, it was the way that those people taught the younger generation. It was really good in that they were very reverent and insistent that we learn exactly how to play like Robert Lockwood and Muddy and Little Walter and Cotton and all of especially the Chess recordings that everybody got really good. That scene produced Nick Curran too, who was of course heavily influenced by Texas, but Nicky and I grew up together in Maine. But getting back to the North Mississippi thing, when I moved to the South and got the gig with Junior Kimbrough, and David and RL and playing, which just meant that I was, by saying got the gig, all that means is that I was at the juke joint every Sunday getting $35 and a bag of weed, and a half pint of moonshine, corn liquor. But I was living with them. I was living in the houses and stuff. But I remember thinking during that time, because this is before RL had made the record with John Spencer and obviously before Junior had died. So literally no white people knew about Junior Kimbrough or RL Burnside. It wasn't a big gig. It wasn't like a good financial gig. And those guys were maybe playing like 4 national shows a year, right? Like, they would do a House of Blues circuit, and Living Blues magazine might have like a little footnote at the back of the magazine with some more anthropology kind of like looking, like, look at these guys in this shack out in the woods, and instead of it being like, something that you would hear or see in a Julia Roberts movie, which is where it ended up, So, but I remember thinking that all those people from New England, like, that the people that told me what blues music is and how to play it wouldn't have thought that was blues music, right? They wouldn't have, right. But when you're there and you're talking to the Kimbroughs or the Burnsides, or you're talking about bloodlines that are interlinked with John Lee Hooker, with Muddy Waters, with Mississippi Fred McDowell. So people that have, the families that have married and bred, So it doesn't get any more directly tied to blues music than that. But yet again, you have a bunch of white people kind of deciding what is and what isn't blues, despite what's happening. So it was very much isolated, especially at that time. And had it not been for John Spencer and some of the marketing moves that Fat Possum did, for better or for for better or for worse, we wouldn't have the buzz and the YouTube videos with millions of hits that RL and his family, at least they get to enjoy that element, if not the money,
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's a shame that it came to, especially with RL, so late in his life.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you mentioned Nick Curran, of course, a hugely talented guy that you worked with. I think you also worked with Sean Costello at one point.
I didn't really work with Sean. I mean, we did some gigs together, but I was friends with Sean. I knew him since he was 15. We stayed in touch all those years, from 95 right up until, what was it, 2008, I think. Right. We stayed in touch, and the last 4 or 5 years of his life, we started having long conversations about life and music and kind of just that kind of stuff. And both of those are just immensely devastating hits, still. And there's literally like not a day goes by that like I don't hear something and think, oh, man, like what would Sean or Nikki think about this? Or, especially listening to WOZ and hearing all of the influence that Cosmo had on the recording in New Orleans, like I'm just learning about that stuff the last 5 or 6 years. And like Nick was probably studying and knew those guys and that recording technique and all that since the time we were kids, when we were 17. And, the fact that I can't really talk to him about that. And like, if Nick had been alive, he would have produced this record, there's no question about that. Like, especially though, he definitely would have produced Behind the Veil, definitely would have produced the last one. And then of course Sean and we're just coming off of the anniversary of his birthday and death the day before, so that's fresh. Every single year, I kind of relive that for 4 or 5 days before and after that.
Yeah.
It was
I mean,
just devastating, man, just devastating.
yeah. Was it We Can Get Together? I mean, I think that's such a wonderful album.
Me
And,
too. Yeah.
I think he was just about to launch into, well, goodness knows what he could have achieved, really.
I think all the albums are incredible. That one in particular, I know that, man, he wasn't real happy that last year. I'll tell you that.
I guess while we're talking about people you've worked with and influences, Johnny Winter and was it Pat Ramsey?
Yep.
That was like a very important part of your life, important
I
part
mean,
of.
Pat was the most important musical influence that I ever had.
Mm,
I mean, in terms of harmonica playing, not so much
yeah,
songwriting. And then, of course, like very few people can sing as well as Pat. You had Curtis Salgado, Sugar Ray Norcia, and John Namath, a handful of others. Pat Pat was one of the great Butterfield. Pat was one of the great blues vocalists ever. And the harmonica playing, of course, was what attracted me to him, but he ended up like a father figure. He was the first one to introduce me to 12-step stuff, and that kind of like never ever pushed me into it. Just kind of talked about himself, and then over the years, it was sort of like a checklist of yets that started to kind of happen. And when the first time I went to jail, he was really one of the only people that was writing me, and he was great, and I loved him so much. And, Sean Costello's first recording was on Pat's record on It's About Time when Sean was 15.
wow, well, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that was his first big recording.
Yeah.
He hadn't released Call the Cops yet. That was his first record. But yeah, and then it was the connection through Pat that landed me on the Johnny Winter record. Not particularly proud of my performance on that record. It was sort of a high pressure situation with not a lot of time for me to prepare. Like I didn't even know the day of the recording if I was going to do the
Right.
recording. So, you know what I mean? So it was,
Mhm.
yeah, I can say it now, but I don't think that Paul Nelson wanted me on that record.
Right.
Yeah, I think they wanted a bigger name, but Johnny Winter wanted me in particular. But I was given 2 passes at the recording. I didn't know what key the song was in, didn't know what song I was playing on. So I had the
Wow.
headphones on, and it just starts clicking, and I'm
Yeah.
recording, and I have no idea what the music is. Nobody's told me anything at all.
Wow, that's incredible.
So yeah.
Didn't you get the second go around because Johnny Winter?
Yeah. Yeah, Paul Nelson just wanted me to have 1 take, and because
That's amazing.
Johnny likes 1 takes, but I didn't know what key the song was in or anything, and so it took me a few minutes to even find the right harmonica to play on, and then Johnny came in, he was at the dentist's. He came in, and I was kinda arguing a little bit with Paul after the recording, trying to advocate for another take. And he was saying, no, Johnny likes 1 take only, and that's what we got. And I think that was like his way of being like, okay, now we don't have to put
Yeah.
him on the record. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so Johnny Winter came in and was like, hey, give the kid another pass. And so I did the best I could. The track that I recorded on was My Babe. None of the musicians that are on that song were on the track that I recorded on. They were all scratch drums, scratch bass, scratch. Johnny Winter wasn't even on the song that I recorded on. They later put it on. They later put him on. Right. So I had no inspiration. I was the first
No.
musician on the track that was going to stay on the track.
That's
So it was a
amazing.
really tough experience for me,
Yeah.
especially because, yeah, I love Johnny Winter so much that, of course, you want that to be the best gig of your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, and he kept really open ears. It seems like Jason had a few times that he ran into Johnny Winter or heard kind words reverberating back to him from Johnny Winter, and I think almost didn't know how to accept that somebody with that type of musical presence in your ears and minds actually heard you play,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
It was crazy.
but it
Yeah.
was exciting.
I guess you were quite young then as well, weren't you, Jason?
I wasn't that young. It was like 2015 or 2015. Yeah. So it was like about 11 years ago. I'm 52 or 53. I'm not sure. Yeah.
But we did get to do a Johnny Winter tune on this new album
Yeah.
too. We did an original of his "Tired of Trying,"
Forgot about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
which
Yeah. There's a yeah. But yeah,
But we
that's
love him. He really loves him too, which is awesome. And the band really loves him too. Everybody in the band loves Johnny Winter. We listen to all of his stuff all the time. Like that's that's one of the heaviest cats that gets played in the van all the time. We love him. We love him so much. Yeah.
yeah.
But I'm still
Yeah.
really, don't get me wrong, I'm really grateful that Paul Nelson, got me, I mean, he did make the call and I can't say for sure that he didn't want me on the record. That's just what
Hmm.
it felt like. I mean, he
Yeah.
didn't, I called like every day for 3 months to find out if I was going to be doing the recording. He never answered the phone. And then at 6 in the morning, the day of the recording, I'm in New York on tour I booked a tour around the recording so that I could afford to go to New York. And because
Yeah.
I was on probation, so the only way I could leave was to work. So I used it as an excuse to get out of Indiana where I was, basically being kept. And then we played Terra Blues in the Village, and it was 4 in the morning. By the time Gino Mateo, rest in peace, was playing with me, and we were in the hotel room at 4 in the morning, and I just stayed up. And at 6 in the morning, I called Paul Nelson one more time, figuring, hey, well, I'm gonna have to leave today, and and then he answered the phone, and he gave me an address. And I called this girl I knew that knew Connecticut in New York, and she gave me directions because I didn't, at that time, didn't know how to use a GPS or didn't have one. I can't remember. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I just drove to to Paul Nelson's house, and then he drove me over to Johnny Winter's, and I was in the recording studio at 7 or 8 in the morning.
Remarkable. Yeah.
I've been up all night. Yep.
you did get to share a few moments with Johnny Winter then.
Yeah, he was great in person. He was really funny and super sharp. And like,
Mm.
yeah, like a lot of people, or I know that I kind of thought that he was, out in left field and stuff, and because of kind of the way he looks and some of the interviews
Mhm.
and stuff. But he was one of the most intuitive, sharpest cats that I ever met in my life, to the point where it was a little scary. Like he could
Right.
look right through you. So there
Right.
was 0 point in any bullshit at all. You just
Yeah.
tell exactly the truth is the only way to communicate with a person like that. It was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one of the great things with Johnny Winter is the work he did with to sort of resurrect Muddy's career as well towards the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, I mean, those are the most electrifying Muddy recordings there
Yeah.
are. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna
Absolutely.
go ahead and say it, Yeah.
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 Yeah. Without doubt. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So the album comes out towards the end of May. I know you're doing some tour dates through May and stuff. Do you think is there any plans to come over to the UK at any point?
I'm not allowed in any province of the royal family
Oh,
because
right.
of
Okay.
Right, because of my felonies. So
Oh,
Canada, the UK, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and anywhere else where the royal family presides means that I can't go.
well, it's their loss.
Man, it really does. It's like that's like the only place, because I got to play Canada before I got in trouble, but you
Mhm.
guys in Australia are really fun and awesome, and I I love my I have a lot of friends in Australia, and I'm friends with some cats in the UK. Will Wilde and I like to talk.
Yeah,
We're friends, so I'd love to go over there, but yeah, it'll probably never happen. It's too risky to bring the band or to promote a show. Even if I get a pardon from the Queen, it's at the discretion of the border guard. And, we've seen it happen before with other artists, Zach Brown Band, Eric Gales, where they got the
yeah,
pardon, they got the immigration attorney, they spent like 10 grand, and then they booked the tour, and then the border guard just says no. And it
yeah. I
and it's
think I was due to see Eric last year. He was going to come over, and then he got refused. I think at the airport. I think they turned him around.
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
and that's like, so when that happens, that's like a $15,000. I'm not for Eric, it's probably more, but for us, that would be like a $15,000 hit. Like
yeah,
I would owe the band around 15 grand for that.
yeah,
So I mean, unless there's some kind of like deposit, like security deposit that guarantees that if I don't get in, or if we don't like pay off the border guard cartel style, I don't know what else.
Well, that's a shame, but yeah.
So has
Hopefully,
Eric gotten out
people.
there? Has Eric Gales come out, and have you gotten to see him since that last show that he
No,
missed?
no, I haven't seen him since, so I don't know what the situation is now with Eric. And it's such a shame, isn't it? Because there's a lot of talented guys.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so
Yeah,
beautiful getting to see somebody who's been through some stuff, who's
yeah,
coming out the other side. It's such an exciting, inspirational thing, and Eric Gales has that
yeah.
electrical
That's right.
quality.
He's got that similar background, hasn't he? That similar story.
Yep, yep, yep.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been great talking to you. Is there anything that you think we haven't covered that you want to throw in there?
I'm real thrilled that Kate's getting a feature spot on the record.
Mm-mm. Yeah,
I'm really glad I invited her in kind of rogue because, I mean, a lot of the questions that you asked, Steve, I really wouldn't have felt comfortable answering. They were stuff about 13 hours and River's Invitation and these kind of numbers. She's been an imperative part of this. At
yeah.
no
Can
time.
I can I just
Yeah.
say, Caitlin, I think the vocal delivery on those tracks is really top notch. Really impressed.
Thank you very much. I've had a good time doing this, talking with you today, and it's so exciting getting to talk to someone who can hear the Approved by Snakes moving
Yeah, yeah,
into 13 hours, and, it's been a pleasure talking with you.
And
yeah.
we're great.
Sure.
I just want to say, yeah, last thing is just we're really grateful to the band, to Brent and Bill Block and Benny, but also to Mike Zito, who's consistently believed
Mm,
in me over the years. He's been a super friend to me, even when I haven't been very nice back to him.
right.
He's just an incredible person. Gulf Coast has been an exceptional label to work with. I'm on my third record with them. I will undoubtedly stay there as long as they're around and continue to
Yeah,
navigate this minefield of a music industry that we're in now.
yeah. I think it's more difficult than ever at the moment.
I think
Yeah.
minefield is probably the wrong word. It's minefield would imply that explosives are possible. It's more like a wasteland, a desert.